Welcome to SI UK India webinar. Thank you for joining us. We are now live with King's College London. Today we have Ian and Palak with us. They will be taking us through this webinar session. We'll answer all the questions after the presentation during the Q&A session. So let's start the webinar. Over to you, Palak.
Thank you, Yuki. So just give me a moment to share the slides. Right. So hi everyone, this is Palak. I'm the international officer based in India with King's College London. I will take you through a couple of slides just to give you a macro perspective of the course and also some bits about King's, and I'll also touch upon personal statements very briefly, of course, just being mindful of the time. So I'll take about 10 to 12 minutes and then I'll pass it on for the other part of the session. So I'm sure most of you have heard about King's, but we were founded in 1829. That makes us about 200 years old. We were one of the founding colleges of University of London. We're part of the Russell Group, and a fact that we are very proud of is that we've produced 40 Nobel laureates so far. The rankings that you see on the screen are often numbers of interest to the students. So according to the Times Higher Education Rankings 2023, we are top 3 in London, top 6 in the UK, and top 35 in the world. These are our alumni that we've produced so far, a number that we are very proud of. So just to give you a sense of the King's community today, we are a large university with 5 campuses in the heart of central London. We have close to about 35,000 students across UG, PG and PhD spread across our 5 campuses. Roughly about a 50% of our student community is international student community represented from about 200 different countries. And from India, we have more than 700 students now. Okay, so I'll spend like about 30 to 40 seconds on this slide. This is one of my favorite slides to speak about. This is where we are located. So the picture that you see on the screen is the aerial view of central London. So all the red boxes that you see on the screen are either hospitals, libraries, or campuses that are owned and managed by King's. And the subjects, of course, that you see mentioned next to these small boxes are the subjects that are taught at that particular campus. In the next couple of slides, I'll also show you a picture to give you a sense of how these campuses look. But of course, you can go on the website and go on YouTube to have more campus tour videos if you're interested in any of these particular campuses. Now, all the purple boxes that you see adjoining most of our campuses are some famous tourist landmarks or institutes of importance, such as the Shard, London Eye, etc. So we're pretty much surrounded by the very best London has to offer. And this might look very spread out on the screen, but all our campuses are with short bus rides from each other or even walking distance from each other. So the feedback that we usually get from the students is that pretty much the whole of London seems to be their classroom, because that's how these are placed in central London. And of course, I'm sure most of you are aware that London has been consistently rated the #1 student city in the world now. And this, of course, is followed by obvious reasons. This is the Strand campus where law and arts and humanities are taught, and it's also an engineering department. This is the Bush House, which is a business school. This is the Waterloo campus. This is the medicine school where, of course, the life sciences and medicine set of courses are taught. So I'm assuming most of you who are here today are interested in life sciences and medicine set of courses. This is the St. Thomas campus. This is the Denmark Hill campus, which was on the bottom right corner of the screen when we discussed the location. This is our iconic and a very famous, this is called the Mall Library. It's exceptionally beautiful piece of art, and it's very mesmerizing to even just have a look at this from inside. Okay, so what you can study at an undergraduate level is, of course, we have close to about 200 set of courses and 9 broad faculties. And if it's not possible to put everything on the screen, so if we divide it with STEM, health subjects, politics, economics and societies, management, finance and law, and arts and humanities, these are some of the courses that I've put on the screen. But of course, it's a good idea to go on the website and check the course modules of the course you're interested in, and also at the same time, check out other similar courses that might be of interest, right? So I won't spend much time here, because honestly, the website will give you a good picture of these courses, and it's very reader friendly with lots of important information given under the course pages. Just to give you a specific set of idea regarding this particular department. So we have biochemistry, we have MBBS, neuroscience, pharmacology, lots of courses. But like I said, of course, the faculty today will cover these programs in their slide deck, but it's also a good idea to have a look on these course pages, entry requirements on the website itself. So let me take you a bit through our application process. What we look at in an application is meeting or exceeding the minimum entry requirements. Now, just to put a caveat out there, meeting the minimum entry requirement does not guarantee an offer at King's. It is just a prerequisite for your application to get assessed. So if you're meeting the minimum entry requirements, we will assess your application. It's given fair chances, but also your LOR, personal statements, if you have aptitude tests that are applicable, all of these need to be really, really strong. And of course, the English language test score as well. So we look at aptitude test only where applicable. So for medicine set of courses, we will need the UCAT. For law, we will need the LNAT, and medicine will also have interviews. But other than that, most of our programs, we don't really need interviews or any other aptitude test. GMAT, GRE, SATs, all of that's not very much needed. Personal statement is very important. It's actually a deal-breaking document in a lot of cases. So that's why I'll spend like next 2 to 3 minutes to briefly tell you what we look at in our personal statements, and hopefully that will be useful for you. So broadly, with entry requirements in terms of the academic scores, we need different combinations for different set of courses, of course, which is why it's always a good idea to check on that particular course page. When you open the course page that interests you, the first box will give you the preferred and required set of subjects. For example, with medicine, we will need chemistry and bio, right? For all eco set of courses, we will need maths. So it's advised to be double sure of you meeting the entry requirements before applying. So be sure of the preferred and the required set of subjects that are needed. In terms of scores, if you're an A-level student, we will need A star, ABB, of course, depending on the course. IB, we need 35 overall, and we will have a combination of HL from 776 to 665, again, depending on the course. CBSE is close to about 93 to about an 80%, but most of the courses will need about 90 to 93. 93 is of course for computer science, but most of the courses will be in the ballpark range of 90%. For state board students, we do not have direct entry. You will have to go to the International Foundation year. And English language test is a mandate or requirement for CBSE and ISE students. However, if you are an IB and A-level student, you might be exempted. This is, of course, on case-to-case basis. So let me spend the next 2 minutes on personal statements to give you a broad sense of how personal statements work. But before I even start, I'll again emphasize on the fact that these are very, very important. So of course, it's key for competitive courses because most of the courses, we don't have interviews or any other tests. So this 4,000 characters document becomes very, very important for the admission committee to assess if you're the right fit for the university or not. So the person statement for this year, of course, so next year it will be changed, but this year it's pretty much like a blank canvas where you have 4,000 characters, not words, or about 47 lines to explain your story. And you aren't given a prompt like US. What I will broadly suggest is that focus on the motivation, aptitude, and determination while you're studying at that particular what's inclined you to that particular course you're looking at. At an undergrad level, we usually suggest it to make it course specific rather than university specific, because with UCAS, you are sending your application to 5 different universities. So mentioning university names is usually not a good idea. Just to give you a broad picture of how you can structure this personal statement. Of course, this one's not set in stone. This is just a suggestion. So it should be about 4 to 5 paragraphs. There should be an introduction, about 3 paragraphs in the middle explaining extracurricular, co-curricular, your interest and what you've done so far inside and outside in classroom. And of course, it should be a nice conclusion, which wraps up the whole story for you. Now, when you're writing your personal statement, of course, you start with basic set of questions that might seem very trivial right now, but they're very, very important as to what interests you in that particular subject. What are you good at that builds your interest in that particular subject, etc. Of course, there are other various important points. For example, for medicine, you will need community experience, and all of those factors are also important for personal statements. But very broadly, explain what you've gained from your experiences. Don't just mention as a bullet point. You have to put evidence of what you're mentioning. So, for example, if you're saying you have a certain skill set, or if you're good at certain something, it's always great to support it by evidence and eliminate sentences that don't add value. 4,000 characters could seem like it's a 4-digit number, but when you actually sit down to write your personal statements, you'll not even realize where those 4,000 characters go. So you should be very, very mindful of what you're putting in, and it's also important of how you're putting it. That's also very important. So what to include? I'll just pick up a few points from here. So UK personal statements needs to be academic focus, of course, unlike the US. So about 80 to 90% of your personal statement should be academic focus, which means whatever you've done inside or outside of classroom with respect to extracurricular, co-curricular, etc., all of that needs to tie back to the course that you're applying for. Work experience employment is of course great, but it's also important on how relevant it is to the course that you're applying, and also how you mention it. Now, how you mention it is what I mean is be reflective of the fact that what you've done so far and how that's made you a stronger applicant for that particular course. So that is important. So you can watch TED Talks, attend taster days, public lectures, virtual open weeks, online courses, lots of things for you to build your personal statement. Now, very, very broadly, what you should avoid is don't unnecessarily lie or exaggerate your personal statements. Don't use opening paragraphs like, since I was in the womb of my mother, I've always wanted to study medicine or a certain subject, right? Plagiarism is a big offense in the UK. Every year, we see students getting warning emails from UCAS, so please avoid plagiarism. Of course, you can take inspiration from the internet, but it's not a very good idea to plagiarize. Avoid informal language, irrelevant quotes, etc. Be very mindful that you are you're using the UK set of spellings, avoiding slangs, etc. Right? So I think I've covered most of this, so I'll not spend much time here. And I think we are already. I think, yeah, my time's finished. So I'll just take you to the end slide where we have our details. Accommodation is usually a very frequently asked question. So we have 12 hours of residences. They're all within walking distance from campuses. So you can pick and choose depending on what suits in with your budget and your preferences. And yeah, if you have any questions that is still not answered in the session, you can always drop us an email at newstudents@kcl.ac.uk. So thank you so much. I was a little fast just to accommodate maximum information, but I hope this was useful. I'll now pass this for further slides. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ian Mcfadzean. I'm one of the professors in the Faculty of Life Sciences and Medicine. And what I'm going to do is kind of suggest to you why it might be a good thing to study the biomedical sciences at King's College London. So just bear with me while I share my screen. Here we go. Right. Right, I hope you should be able to see that. So as I say, I'm going to be talking about why you might want to study the biomedical sciences at King's. And just to remind you, the biomedical sciences are the sciences that underpin medicine. So the science that underpins how we develop new treatments for disease, how we understand more about disease, etc., etc. And Here at King's, we offer a range of interdisciplinary degree programs in the biomedical sciences. We've got one of the largest centres for medical and professional healthcare education. We teach medics, dentists, nurses, midwives, physiotherapists, pharmacists, and others. And alongside that, we carry out research in the biomedical sciences. So all of our lecturers and professors are also involved in research. And we've got, as we mentioned earlier, a great history in research success, including being involved in DNA discovery. And we think we offer really good degree programs, but more importantly, employers think we offer very good degree programs because our graduates go on and do fantastic things, whether in research labs or elsewhere, once they leave us. So rather than just going through all the degree programs, what I've done is I've put together a kind of hypothetical case study based around this individual, Ilya. And Ilya is he's an accountant, 55-year-old accountant, and a few years ago he became depressed. He was prescribed an antidepressant drug, but a few years later he lost his sense of smell. And he started to develop a tremor, which meant he was unable to write effectively. And that rang alarm bells with the physicians. And as expected, he was diagnosed with the disease, Parkinson's disease. And he was prescribed a drug to treat his Parkinson's disease. That drug is called L-DOPA. And what L-DOPA does is it replaces a neurotransmitter, dopamine, in the brains of patients with Parkinson's disease. But one of the problems with Parkinson's disease, I'll mention later, is it's a progressive disease. And Ilya's health continued to decline. He had increasing difficulty getting around his home. And he'd fallen badly a few times because the movement disorder that is Parkinson's disease meant he was losing his balance quite frequently. He also developed a rather strange side effect of his drug treatment, which he developed a fond love of gambling online. And I'll mention why this happens later. And he was trying to hide the signs of unwanted movements of his limbs. He had these involuntary movement of his limbs, which again is a side effect of his drug treatment. And he was struggling to hide these involuntary flailing movements. So he was referred to a wider healthcare team to try to improve his treatment. So the question is, who might be involved in Ilya's treatment from now on in? Well, here's a long list of them here: doctors, pharmacists, nurses, dietitians, etc., etc. And right at the bottom here, we'll have research scientists who, as biomedical scientists, will be trying to understand Parkinson's disease and develop new treatments. But just to emphasize how King's is involved in this, we deliver degree programs in all of these areas, with the exception of optometry and podiatry. So as I mentioned, we teach doctors, pharmacists, nurses, dietitians, psychologists, and indeed research scientists. And these are the ones I'm going to be focusing on. So here's our list of our biomedical sciences that we teach here at King's. And I'm not going to go through them, but you can see they range from anatomy at the top here down to physiology at the bottom. And I'm just going to say a little bit about how people studying these individual degrees might contribute to understanding Ilya's disease and improving his treatment. So let's start at the molecular level, at biochemistry, the molecular basis of disease and life. It may be difficult for us to accept, but everything we do is governed by chemical interactions or reactions that occur inside the cells of our body or between the cells of our body. And biochemistry is the understanding of those chemical reactions. So if you enjoy chemistry but want to apply it to a biological environment, or particularly a biomedical environment, then the degree course in biochemistry might be for you. Sometimes also called biological chemistry. So on the right-hand side here, we've got the thing that you might typically see in a biochemistry slide, where we've got a very signaling pathways that are happening inside nerve cells. This is the membrane of a nerve cell, and these are very signaling pathways that happen inside them. And in some ways, it's remarkable that these signaling pathways, which are incredibly complex, it's kind of remarkable they don't go wrong more often. But one of the things we know happens in Parkinson's disease is that there's a buildup of a damaged protein. The protein is called alpha-synuclein, which builds up inside the cell. Here's alpha-synuclein down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And normally cells have effective mechanisms of getting rid of damaged proteins, but for some reason in Parkinson's disease, they can get rid of this alpha-synuclein. It builds up and eventually causes damage to the nerve cells. So people involved in biochemistry are trying to understand, well, what has gone wrong inside these nerve cells? Which enzymes are malfunctioning that leads to this buildup of this aberrant protein? So that's the kind of thing a biochemist might be interested in. So that might then lead us to better understand molecular targets that we could target with drugs. Still at the molecular level, we've got molecular genetics. And as you know, molecular genetics is how are the characteristics of a disease passed from one generation to the other. And we know that there are some forms of Parkinson's disease, not all, but there are some forms of Parkinson's disease that are inherited. And that's due to, we know they're caused by mutations in genes in a critical enzyme that normally gets rid of these damaged proteins, such as alpha-synuclein, inside the nerve cells. So there is a genetic form of Parkinson's disease. But the other thing our genes determine is how we respond to drugs. Not all patients respond in the same way to drugs. And I'm actually a pharmacologist, so I'm interested in drugs and drug action. And we know increasingly that our genes determine how effective drugs might be in treating a disease within an individual patient. So genetics gets involved in the disease, but it also gets involved in how we respond to the treatment of that disease. And increasingly, molecular genetics is helping us understand those variations. Now, moving away from the molecular level, we move up into anatomy, developmental, and human biology. And as you know, anatomy is how does the structure of the body relate to its function? In simplistic terms, why is the heart heart-shaped, for example? But in this kind of area, we can understand things like human evolution, structure, the function and development of behavior. So we may look at what's called developmental biology. How do we develop from the embryo into the adult individual? It includes the biology of addiction, behavioral sciences. I mentioned earlier that Ilya has developed this side effect when he's become addicted to gambling. And that's a very common side effect of people getting treated with Parkinson's disease. We know that in Parkinson's disease, they lack dopamine in a part of their brain called the substantia nigra. But dopamine is also involved in another part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is the part of the brain that leads to pleasure. And it means that if you give dopamine to a patient to improve their Parkinson's disease, they get more pleasure than usual from things like gambling. So they become more addicted to gambling. And so we know that this is a side effect of the dopamine treatment. And another area where developmental biologists might be involved is that we're increasingly trying to use stem cell therapies to repair the brains of patients with Parkinson's disease. We know that in Parkinson's, those patients have lost dopamine cells from their brain. So the question is, can we replace those dopamine cells? And the answer is, in theory, yes. We could transplant stem cells into their brain. And as you probably know, stem cells have got this ability to transform into any different cell type of the body. But what we need to know is, what do we have to do to a stem cell to make it become a dopaminergic nerve cell? And cell biologists will be telling us what we have to do in terms of what we have to treat the stem cells with. But anatomists and developmental biologists will be telling us, well, where do we have to put the stem cells in the brain so that they become effective in treating Parkinson's disease? So we can make new dopaminergic neurons, as shown in the bottom right-hand side here. The green cells are dopaminergic cells by using stem cells. And the top slide shows where in the brain we need to transplant them. We need to put them into this substantia nigra pathway here to get them to produce an effect. Related to anatomy is physiology. How does the body function in health? How is movement controlled? We've said that Ilya is losing control of his balance. Which parts of the brain, for example, are involved in controlling movement? How does that brain then communicate with the muscles of the body to control balance and control movement? As you know, Parkinson's disease is associated with this tremor of the muscles. Why is that happening? Patients also become very rigid and they develop a stooped posture. So they're losing that posture control. So how is that posture controlled in health? What has changed in Parkinson's disease that might allow us to kind of fix things? So that's physiology, the kind of how the body functions in health, but obviously related to that's what we call pathophysiology, which is what changes in disease. Now, clearly very important in Parkinson's disease is the subject of neuroscience, the subject of nerve cells, the science of nerve cells. And it looks at how the nerve system under controlled conditions and disease is altered. So how does the brain change in Parkinson's disease? What is the underlying pathology and what neurotransmitters are effective? I've already mentioned that it's dopamine that's the major problem, a lack of dopamine in a part of the brain called the nigral striatal pathway. And just to emphasize this is a cross-section of a normal brain. It's obviously a post-mortem section from brain, human brain. And this dark area is an area of the brain called the striatum. And this is where dopamine is normally released in the brain. And dopamine has got this black, this dark color. And what you can see in the brain from a Parkinsonian patient is that dark color has gone. And that is because of a loss of these dopaminergic nerve cells in the substantia nigra here. Now, why have those nerve cells died? Well, I mentioned earlier that the nerve cells have died because of this buildup of this damaged protein within them, this protein called alpha-synuclein. And when that protein builds up, it forms clumps in the nerve cells. And these clumps of damaged protein are called Lewy bodies. And here you can see a nerve cell at a higher magnification with these dark clumps of aberrant protein inside them. And this eventually leads to the death of the nerve cell. Now, what we don't know is why is this building up, but we do know that the death of the nerve cells is caused by the buildup of this protein and the formation of these Lewy bodies. So we know what neurotransmitters are involved in Parkinson's disease, but we've got to also think, well, what other roles does dopamine play in the body, in the brain, for example? I've mentioned it's involved in the kind of reward that you get from things like gambling. And as I mentioned earlier, my particular interest is in pharmacology, so I study drugs and drug action. And obviously what we're trying to do here is develop drugs that we can use to treat Parkinson's disease. And we already have a good drug that treats Parkinson's disease. It's a drug called L-DOPA. And here's L-DOPA here. Now, this is the structure of L-DOPA, and this is the structure of dopamine. Now, L-DOPA is a precursor for dopamine. It gets taken into the body and it's converted by an enzyme called dopa decarboxylase into dopamine. And so if we give a patient L-DOPA, the enzyme converts it into dopamine and we get an increase in dopamine in the brain, which is good. That leads to treatment for Parkinson's disease. It starts to replace the dopamine which is lost in these patients. That's what we're aiming to do, but there is a problem. And that is there is also decarboxylase in your gut. And when the dopa decarboxylase converts dopamine in your gut, it leads to nausea and vomiting as a side effect. It makes patients feel very nauseous. So that's a problem for us. And one of the questions we have to think about as a pharmacologist, well, how do we separate the good part of the L-DOPA treatment from the bad? And the way we do that is we include with the dopamine a drug called benserazide. And benserazide is a dopa decarboxylase inhibitor. So it prevents L-DOPA being converted to dopamine. But the magical thing about benserazide is it acts only outside the brain. It can't cross what's called the blood-brain barrier. So it acts outside the brain, preventing the formation of dopamine in the gut, but it can't get into the brain. So the dopa can still get into the brain. Dopa decarboxylase still works in the brain because benserazide is not inhibiting it. So we get an increase in dopamine in the brain. We don't get an increase in dopamine in the gut. So we get rid of the gastrointestinal side effect of nausea and vomiting. But I need to emphasize there is no cure for Parkinson's disease with a drug. All we're really doing is relieving the symptoms. The disease, as we saw in Ilya's case, continues to progress, the nerve cells continue to die, and we get other kind of strange side effects emerging. So we don't have a cure for Parkinson's disease. And one of the things that happens is these pulses of dopamine in the brain, which are very unnatural, they lead to these involuntary movements that I mentioned earlier that Ilya had, along with his addictive behavior. And then finally, for the biosciences, immunology, how does the immune system function to protect us in disease? And one of the things we're increasingly knowing is the immune system is involved in some forms of neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's disease and also Alzheimer's disease. That's almost like there's a kind of chronic inflammation occurring inside the brain of patients with Parkinson's disease. And changes in that, what we call the immune microenvironment, mean that the nerve cells have become more easily damaged, and it may be one of the reasons that the nerve cells start to die more readily. And we're getting to the bottom of understanding this in a bit more detail. But the other reason immunology is important is we're now developing drugs which are in the form of antibodies. And as you know, antibodies have got this ability to recognize certain proteins. And one of the things we'll be able to do is develop antibodies that can recognize alpha-synuclein, this damaged protein in the brain of Parkinson's disease patients. And it can bind to that alpha-synuclein and take it out of the brain. So it can be used to mop up abnormal alpha-synuclein. Now, these antibodies are not available clinically yet. We can use them in animal models at the moment, but they offer a great deal of hope that we might be able to prevent this buildup of alpha-synuclein by giving patients antibodies. So that's the biomedical sciences very rapidly. And these are the kind of degree programs that we offer here at King's College London. And I'm not going to go through them, but you can see they've got anatomy, biochemistry, biomedical science, which is a very interdisciplinary program where you can build up from all these other programs the modules you want to study. The important thing I want to tell you as potential applicants is that all of those programs follow the same year one curriculum. In other words, it doesn't matter which of these degree programs you come to study, you will all follow the same modules in year one. We call that our common year one curriculum. And the reasons that's important is that it doesn't matter which of these degree programs you apply for. So let's say you applied to study medical physiology, but when you got here, you realize that actually it's not physiology I'm interested in. I really like neuroscience. Because you have followed the same curriculum as neuroscience students, you can change from physiology to any of these other degree programs at the end of year one. So don't worry if you're not sure which of these programs it is you want to study. You can apply for one of them. They've all got exactly the same entry qualifications. Apply for one of them. And when you get here, you'll be introduced to kind of introductory modules in all of those biosciences. And if at the end of year one, you feel you've made a mistake and there's something else you're more interested in, you can switch to a different degree program. And from the end of year two, you then start to follow a wide choice of optional modules in years 2 and 3, which are kind of reflect more your interests. And then the final thing I'm just to say, there are also other things you can do to enhance your degree when you're with us. We've got an international exchange program with a range of international universities. You can do a placement year where you take a year out of university and work for a year, typically in industry. You can do research projects in our labs over the summer months, or there's an extra qualification called an Associateship of King's College London, which is only available to students of King's College London. So that was a bit of a rapid tour of what you can do as a biomedical scientist. I'm going to finish there, and I'd be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you for taking out time and giving us this insightful presentation. Now time for Q&A session. I will call out the questions from YouTube chat box. So the first question is, I recently completed my 12th. Should I apply for UG from UK, or should I complete my UG from India and then apply?
So if I go first, so it's pretty much like a personal choice, of course. It depends on a lot of factors, with funds, with meeting the minimum entry requirements. Of course, there's pros and cons for different things. If you feel yourself that you're ready to kind of go to another country and get that kind of an exposure, that's great. So again, it's a very personal choice. So you will also have to research through modules, to research through the post-curriculum sector to see what fits in and aligns with best that is suiting with what you want to study, basically. So that's a short answer from that perspective. But
I have a 1-year gap after my 12th. Can I apply for graduation in law?
yeah, gap years are pretty normal outside, so that's okay. However, it's good that how you justify it, because sometimes the visa officers, etc., will also ask you. But as long as you justify that, what you've done in that particular year, that should be good. So gap year and mature student is not really a problem outside.
Okay,
I think the other thing to say is that it's always good to say what you've gained from your gap year. I think Palak mentioned in our chat that, experience, what is it you've gained from that experience? And that experience would include your gap year.
Okay. Who are the top 3 employers after completing MBA?
So we don't offer MBA. What we do have at a postgrad level is MBA and MSc. But of course, employers, so we have those business set of programs. There's no top 3 employers as such that we can say. It's very different in terms. I mean, top 3 is a very subjective term in terms of either salary or job role or brand, etc. So that's very subjective. However, what we can say that we are very, very we are in the top list of universities outside with various rankings to get employed. And the latest stats that we published was 95.6% of our students landed into employment in the first 6 months of finishing their degree. So all of that is there, but yeah, I mean, if you're doing it from any good university, it's always preferred by employers. So don't worry so much about these micro perspectives, I'll say at this point. Anything you want to add with careers, etc.? So please feel free to share your thoughts.
No, I mean, I think the thing that opens up doors for any graduate is getting a good degree. And once you get a good degree, there are a whole host of careers open to you. In the biomedical sciences, we don't have a certain career goal in mind for our graduates. We're teaching people with scientific thinking. And if you think what you do as a scientist, you identify a problem, you develop a hypothesis that might explain that problem, you carry out an experiment to test your hypothesis, and then the cycle goes round again. And you can apply that way of thinking to any career where you're involved in problem solving. And I would say that of our graduates in the bioscientists, probably a third of them will go on and work in a lab of some form. Another third will say, well, I want to use my science, but I don't want to wear a white coat. I don't want to work in a lab. So they might work in government. They might work in science, media, and communication. And then another third will take the degree and go into a career role that's just for graduate entry. But the thing that will open up doors is getting a good degree. And to get a good degree, you should study a subject you're interested in. It's very difficult to get a good degree if you're not interested in the subject material you're studying.
So I'll just answer that question that you asked from a different perspective. So of course, it's a fair question to ask when you're starting your journey, etc. So instead of worrying that minutely, it's always a good idea to check what kind of career service and career support that particular university provides, and of course, what kind of connections do they have with employers in terms of industrial training or any of those bits. So instead of getting into that detail of what the employers are, I think it's a fair research to do of what kind of career service opportunities and events and internships, etc., that particular university gives. So just to answer from King's perspective, we have a very strong career service division. In fact, there are about 3 of them. Some are exclusive for certain departments. For example, business will have a specific business career service division itself that will help organize about 700 to I mean, about 800 to 900 events in a year. Of course, all of them will not be suitable for each and every one, but just pick and choose of what kind of events are suited to you. These are some networking events. They'll connect you with employers. There'll be networking nights, guest lectures, CV workshops. They'll help you with getting yourself ready to apply to jobs, etc. They'll also connect you with relevant employers, and these services are also valid 2 years post you graduating from the college. So this is something that you should look at while you're researching for universities.
So, okay, next question is, do you have information on average earning post completing masters?
First, we don't publish that data as such, but if it's a life sciences related question, I think it can be answered. But other than that, I don't think we really publish it.
No,
But
we don't ask for average earning. I mean, that's a confidential matter between the graduates and their employers.
But yeah, it's around the range of 35K per year. But of course, that's also very subjective on a lot of things, with what brand you're choosing, what position, what years of work ex do you come with, and of course, it's a two-way street of efforts. I'll say, of course, the college will help you get the best possible career placement, but it's also on you how proactive you are to reach out with the career service vision, attend those events, etc. So the rough ballpark figure in that range will be about 35K per year.
I mean, one of the things that does happen is in the UK, the government, because UK students are funded by a loan from the government, they need to guarantee that the students are getting value for their money from the universities. And one of the things they look at is what percentage of students, undergraduate students, go into either what they would call graduate level employment, in other words, a job where you need a degree, or postgraduate study. And we don't have the precise numbers, but what we can say is that King's is towards the top end of that range of, I think it's about, I can't remember the precise number, it's about 80 to 90% of our students, undergraduate students, end up in graduate level employment.
So yeah, so a number that we say very, very proudly, it's not a number, but the order is that we are second highest in terms of salaries after graduation. So yeah, that's something that we say very proudly. Also, with post-study work visa, we now have the 2-year post-study work visa, which is of course a great tool to students to land up into.
Okay. And how accessible is KCL from Temple Metro?
When do you want to answer that one?
From Temple Metro, it depends which campus you're studying on. Temple is right by the Strand campus, 5 minutes from Strand campus. The Guy's Waterloo campus, Guy's campus is probably a tube ride away, but by tube and a little walk across the bridge, it takes about 20 minutes. If I go to the Strand campus, Waterloo campus is a walk across the bridge and it takes about 10 minutes. So it depends on exactly which campus you're on.
How much minimum attendance we need to maintain at KCL?
Again, it depends on the degree program you're studying. If you're studying a science program, you tend to be on campus a lot more because you will have lectures, tutorials, and lab sessions. Whereas if you're doing an arts and humanities program, you won't have the laboratory work. So it's a very difficult question to answer because it will depend on precisely your degree program.
Our next question is, how big is the Indian community at KCL?
So I did touch upon this in my slides. So we have more than about 700 to 800 students across different study levels. But it's of course like it's a it's a great number to feel yourself at home, but also kind of interact with people from different countries and communities, which of course is a great learning exposure in itself. This was the last, this is of course an estimate of the last stats that I know, but now of course it's more than 1,000. So because we are seeing a great increase of students from India across UG and PG levels. So yeah, now it's safe to say that it's more than 1,000. But this is of course at all 5 campuses studying different set of programs across UG, PG and doctorate levels. So.
And of course, there are many more students of Indian heritage from the UK and the rest of Europe studying at King's. So I think 700 is the lower number. But there are very vibrant Indian societies, Bhangra societies, etc. So it's a vibrant community.
Okay, so next question is, can we get job easily after completing MBA?
So I'll put this again, we do not have MBA. It's a nomenclature difference with different countries and continents. So MBA is more of a US or an Indian kind of a concept broadly. But if you mean masters, then yes, we have MA and MSc in business domains. And I would see, it's like I said, there is like Indian universities have this concept of 100% job guarantee placement or how it's published and advertised. No university outside, irrespective of the university, country or continent, will do it that way. They will give you lots and lots of support. They will help you connect with employers. They'll prepare you so well to attend interviews and crack interviews, etc. But it's also on how much effort do you put in. You know, if the career service division is organizing a series of networking events, and if you don't just go and talk to employers or don't just attend these events, if there's nothing that can help you. Networking is a big thing outside. So a lot of people also end up getting employment on their own because they've just kind of networked with somebody, be it an alumni, or if they've organized a guest lecture with someone being a part of a certain society, they've just networked and got into a job. But I think we're getting more management set of questions today. We can hold a separate session for management where we can discuss more about management questions. If today we can confine, because we have a trained faculty with us today, and so if we can confine our questions to biomedical field, etc., that would be really useful. So, you know, it's a free space to pick his brains and of course get as much information from him as possible. So I'll request the questions to be a little more diverted into this direction.
Okay. If we go for medicine at KCL, so after that, can I practice that back in India?
I don't know is the honest answer, because that will be dependent upon the Indian regulatory body. I would imagine so, but it may be you've got to do a kind of another little exam when you go back to India to check your skill set, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. Can you please tell me deadline for January 2024 intake? Also, if there is any scholarship available.
So the UCAS deadline is what we follow. So for 2024, it will be 15th of October this year. So yeah. 15th of October 2023 will be your deadline for medicine set of courses if you want to apply for 2024 intake. This deadline comes a little earlier than other UCAS deadlines, so please be very mindful of the medicine deadline. Unfortunately, we don't have scholarships available for medicine set of students. We also have, for medicine, we have 30 students quota, which means that any student beyond UK, all international students, of course, that the number is just 30, which of course makes it very competitive as well. So it's, I think, 16th of October from this year. Last year was 15th of October. Just double check the UCAS website, please. But it's definitely on October. It's not January like other set of courses. A lot of students tend to miss this because they get confused. So please, if you're looking for medicine set of courses, please double check that.
Yeah, I think it's 15th of October for Oxford, Cambridge, medicine, dentistry and veterinary medicine. So obviously at King's it's veterinary, dentistry or medicine are the 15th of October deadlines.
Okay. Acceptance rate for medicine international student.
Say again.
What is the acceptance rate for medicine international students?
Well, the issue for international students in medicine is that there is a limited number of places available. So it's the acceptance rate in that respect is less than for non-international students simply because there are fewer places available. So it is very competitive. I don't have an actual number for the acceptance rate, but I would imagine it's probably of the order of around single figure percentage wise.
Okay. So I have
Yes.
covered.
So acceptance rates we don't really publish. It's not like an official stats that we publish. However, the number that is restricted, like I said, is 30. Usually the acceptance rate for Kings is between 15 to 30%, which is for the courses that don't have a cap. But of course, because this has a cap, as Sam correctly mentioned, it will be like a single digit number. But Kings is pretty competitive for programs.
So I have covered all the questions from YouTube chat box. Thank you for answering all the questions so well. Do you want to share any final words?
I think the only thing I would say is that those who are interested in studying medicine, just bear in mind that you always have what's called an insurance offer if you apply to the UK, where you have your 4 medical schools, then you've got a 5th place on your UCAS form, which is really for a degree that you would study if you were unsuccessful in getting into medicine. And the biomedical programs are quite commonly used by students as their insurance offer. And just to say, going back to what Palak was saying earlier about personal statements, we fully understand that. So if the bulk of your personal statement is relating to medicine, don't worry too much if you don't have space to write about biomedical science or pharmacology. We understand that that may be because it's your insurance offer. So as long as you've got a personal statement that's sensible about medicine and understanding disease, treatment of disease, etc., that will be fine for the biomedical sciences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so
I think pretty much that, because these are competitive set of programs. And I mean, biomedical is one of the programs which comes under top 3. I think, yeah, last year when we published the number of applications that we got. So of course, the application number is far huge than the number of seats. So the top 3, if we took out the top 3 programs, biomedical was one of those, which means that it definitely attracts a lot of high quality applications. And medicine, of course, has that quota, which also makes it more competitive. So focus, first of all, the fundamental thing is to check if you're meeting the minimum entry requirement, irrespective of whatever board you're coming from. Please double check that. Then, of course, your personal statement and LOAs becomes important, because that helps you stand. I mean, it just kind of helps you better stand out from the crowd. And medicine will also have interviews. So earlier it was MMI formats, now it's the panel format. So preparing for the interviews also is important. And of course, very, very important for you for medicine is also the UCAT. Those scores are also, so when Kings says that we need all of this, we actually assess applications holistically. So it's not one thing or one thing important than the other. So all of these things are very important. So kind of all the best for your applications this year. And we hope to see some of you at least with us. So, yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your valuable time. All the audience, if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact SI UK India office. For more update, do follow us on our social media handles. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Ian. Just want to thank you. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, no
Yeah.
problem. Was that okay from your perspective?
It was brilliant. I honestly feel that this is one of the most interesting presentations I've seen, because you started from the case study perspective. Usually everybody talks about the courses, and it I think this is a much better approach. And when we talk, I think I'll take some ideas from you and,
Okay.
present it to the students. I think this is a wonderful kind of a format to kind of, attract the students' attention. Thank
Yeah,
you so much. Yeah.
no problem. Thank you very much.
Okay. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Yukti. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.